The gold band caught the afternoon sun as Penelope Edwards held it up to the pawnbroker's dim window, her hand trembling so badly she nearly dropped it twice. She had walked into Scottsbluff, Nebraska, with nothing but the clothes on her back, a carpet bag with 2 dresses, and the wedding ring that represented everything she had lost in the span of 6 brutal months. The pawnbroker, a thin man with spectacles that magnified his watery eyes, squinted at the ring through his loupe. "It is not worth much," he said in a nasal voice that made Penelope's stomach clench. "Maybe $15. 15. The word came out as barely a whisper. She had been counting on at least 30, maybe 40 if luck smiled on her for once. "But it is solid gold. My husband paid 50 for it back in Ohio." "Your husband is not here now, is he?" The pawnbroker set down his loupe with a click that sounded like a door slamming. "And gold prices are not what they were. $15, take it or leave it." Penelope looked down at the ring, seeing not just the metal but the memory of Thomas slipping it onto her finger 3 years ago in the little church back home. She saw his smile, heard his promises, felt the hope that had bloomed in her chest like a prairie flower in spring. Then she saw the other memories, the ones that had driven her west in search of a fresh start. The coughing that started last winter, the blood on his handkerchief, the way his body had wasted away until he was nothing but bones and determination, and then finally just bones in a grave she could not afford to mark properly. "I will think about it," she managed, pulling the ring back and clutching it in her fist. "Suit yourself." The pawnbroker had already lost interest, turning back to his ledger with the air of a man who knew desperate women would always come crawling back. Penelope stepped out onto the wooden boardwalk, blinking in the harsh September sunlight of 1884. Scottsbluff was not a large town, but it was busy, situated as it was along the North Platte River with wagon trains still occasionally passing through, even though the railroad had changed everything. She had arrived here 2 weeks ago on that very railroad, spending the last of her money on the ticket west, because staying in Ohio meant staying with her late husband's brother. And that man had made it clear what kind of arrangement he expected in exchange for room and board. So she had run, choosing uncertainty over degradation, and now she stood on a street in Nebraska with no prospects, no money, and apparently a wedding ring worth far less than her memories of it. Her stomach growled, reminding her that she had eaten nothing but a bread roll for breakfast, purchased with one of her last remaining coins. The boarding house where she had taken a room would expect payment by Friday, and it was already Wednesday. She had 2 days to find work or money or both, and so far every shop and saloon and respectable establishment had turned her away. Women did not have many options out here, and the ones that existed were either already filled or required skills she did not possess. Penelope started walking, not sure where she was going, just knowing she needed to move. The boardwalk gave way to Dirt Street, and she found herself near the stockyards where cattle lowed and cowboys shouted and the smell of animals mixed with dust and manure. It was not a pleasant area, but there was life here, energy, possibility. A group of men stood near a fence examining horses. She could hear them negotiating prices, their voices carrying that particular blend of friendliness and calculation that came with trading. One man stood slightly apart from the others, tall and lean in worn denim and a dark brown hat that shadowed his face. Something about the way he held himself caught her attention, a stillness that contrasted with the barely controlled chaos around him. As she watched, one of the horses, a paint mare, suddenly reared and broke free from the man holding her rope. The mare bolted directly toward Penelope, eyes rolling white with panic. She froze, unable to move, unable to think, just seeing the hooves and the massive body bearing down on her. Then strong hands grabbed her waist and yanked her sideways, and she tumbled into a hard chest as the mare thundered past where she had been standing. Her rescuer held her steady as she gasped for breath, one arm still around her waist, the other braced against a post. "You all right, madam?" The voice was deep and rough, like gravel rolling in a creek bed. Penelope looked up and found herself staring into eyes the color of creek water themselves, gray-green and startlingly clear in a face tanned by sun and wind. The man who had pulled her to safety was the same one she had noticed before, and up close she could see he was younger than she had thought, maybe 25 or 26, with dark brown hair that curled slightly at his collar and a jaw shadowed with stubble. "I think so." Her own voice sounded shaky. "Thank you. I was not paying attention. Easy mistake to make." He released her carefully, as if she might break, and stepped back to give her space. "These stockyards are no place for a lady, though. Can I help you find somewhere safer?" There was no judgment in his tone, just genuine concern, and something about that kindness made Penelope's eyes sting with unexpected tears. She blinked them back furiously. "I was just walking. I did not mean to end up here." The man studied her for a moment, and she had the uncomfortable feeling he was seeing too much. The cheapness of her dress, mended in several places, the worn state of her shoes, the carpet bag she carried everywhere because she did not trust leaving it at the boarding house. The desperation she was trying so hard to hide. "You look like you could use something to eat," he said finally. "There is a decent place just up the street, serves a good beef stew. Would you allow me to buy you lunch?" Pride warred with hunger and practicality. She did not know this man. But she also did not have the luxury of refusing kindness when it was offered, not with 2 days until rent was due and no prospects in sight. "I should not," she said, even as she felt herself wavering. "No strings attached," he said, and there was something in his tone that made her believe him. "Just seems like you might need a hot meal, and I was heading that way anyway. Name is Ashton Vance, by the way. I work the Triple C Ranch about 10 miles north of here." Penelope Edwards. She hesitated another moment, then nodded. "All right, thank you." They walked back toward the main street, Ashton keeping a respectful distance beside her. He moved with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin, nodding to people they passed, clearly known in town. Penelope found herself curious about him despite her better judgment. There were many cowboys in Scottsbluff, men drifting through or working the local ranches, but something about Ashton seemed different. More settled, maybe, more solid. The restaurant was small and clean, with checkered curtains and the smell of good cooking. Ashton held the door for her and guided her to a table near the back, away from the window. When the waitress came, he ordered stew for both of them without asking what Penelope wanted, which might have annoyed her if she had been in any position to be particular. "So," he said after the waitress left, folding his hands on the table, "what brings you to Scottsbluff, Mrs. Edwards?" She noticed he had registered the wedding ring still clutched in her left hand. "Just looking for a fresh start, and it is Widow Edwards, actually. My husband passed 6 months ago. I am sorry for your loss." The words were simple but sincere. "That is recent, must be hard. It has been challenging." The understatement of her life, but she was not about to pour out her troubles to a stranger, no matter how kind he seemed. "I am looking for work, but there does not seem to be much available for women in this town." "What kind of work can you do?" "I can cook, clean, so. I was a school teacher before I married, so I can read and write and do figures. I am not afraid of hard work." She heard the defensive edge in her voice and tried to soften it. "I just need a chance." Ashton nodded slowly, his eyes thoughtful. "The school teacher here, Miss Harrison, is planning to get married and move to Denver. School board has been looking for a replacement. You might inquire there." Hope flared in Penelope's chest, bright and painful. "Really? Where would I find the school board, mayor's office above the general store? Ask for Henry Blackwell. He is in charge." Ashton paused as the waitress brought their food, 2 steaming bowls of stew thick with beef and vegetables, plus a plate of bread. "But I should warn you, they are pretty particular about who they hire. Small town, everyone knowing everyone's business. They will want references, proof of your teaching experience." The hope dimmed slightly. "I have a letter from the school where I taught in Ohio. It is in my bag at the boarding house. That should help." Ashton started eating, and Penelope followed suit, trying not to wolf down the food even though it was the best thing she had tasted in weeks. He had good manners for a cowboy, she noticed. Did not eat with his mouth open or talk while chewing. There was something almost refined about him beneath the rough exterior. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, the food warm and filling in her empty stomach. Penelope felt some of her desperation ease just from having something practical to do, somewhere to go. Maybe the teaching job would work out. Maybe her luck was finally turning. "Can I ask you something?" Ashton said after a while, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. "You can ask." She did not promise to answer. "Why were you at the pawnbroker's earlier?" "I saw you coming out of his shop looking pretty upset." Heat flooded Penelope's face. "You were watching me." "Not intentionally. I was at the Sadler's next door, saw you through the window. You just looked so sad, holding that ring." He nodded at her hand where she still clutched the gold band. "Figured you were trying to sell it." There did not seem to be any point in denying it. "I was." He offered $15. "It is not enough, but I may not have a choice." "How much do you need?" The question was too direct, too personal, but something about Ashton's steady gaze made her answer honestly. "I owe the boarding house $6 by Friday. I need money for food. And I need enough to last until I can find work, assuming anyone will hire me. So probably $30 minimum to give me a cushion." Ashton was quiet for a moment, his fingers drumming lightly on the table. "I will give you $50 for the ring." Penelope's head jerked up. "What? $50? That is more than fair for a gold band, I think. And you clearly need the money more than I need to keep it in my pocket." "Why would you do that?" Suspicion warred with desperate hope. "You do not even know me." "No, but I know what it is like to be down on your luck and need a hand. Someone helped me once when I needed it. Figured I could pass that along." He said it so simply, as if offering a stranger $50 was the most natural thing in the world. "Besides, I have been thinking about getting something nice for my mother. This would be perfect for her birthday next month." It was a lie Penelope was almost certain. A kindness dressed up as self-interest to make it easier for her to accept. But $50 was $50, and pride was a luxury she could not afford. "All right," she said quietly. $50 and the ring is yours." Ashton pulled out a worn leather wallet and counted out the bills, laying them on the table between them. Penelope stared at the money, more cash than she had seen in months. Slowly, she uncurled her fingers from the ring, feeling like she was giving up a piece of herself. The gold band looked small and inadequate in her palm, a token of broken promises and dead dreams. She held it out to Ashton. He took it, his fingers rough and warm as they brushed against hers, and examined the ring for a moment. Penelope expected him to pocket it, but instead he just held it, turning it over thoughtfully. "What size was your husband?" he asked. The question caught her off guard. "What? Was he a big man, small?" "This ring is pretty small, probably would not fit most men I know." Thomas was thin. "Especially at the end." The words hurt to say. "Why does it matter?" "Just curious." Ashton set the ring down on the table, then did something that made Penelope's heart stop. He reached across, took her left hand gently in his and slid the ring back onto her third finger. "There. I think it looks better on you." Penelope stared at him, unable to form words. "I do not understand. I bought it fair and square, paid $50 for it. Now I am giving it back to you because you should not have to sell your wedding ring to survive. Consider it a gift." His hand still held hers, warm and steady. No woman should have to give up her memories for money. Something broke open in Penelope's chest, a wall she had been holding up through sheer force of will. Tears spilled down her cheeks before she could stop them, and she pulled her hand back to cover her face, mortified to be crying in public in front of a stranger who had shown her more kindness in an hour than most people had in months. "I am sorry," she managed through her tears. "I am so sorry. I do not usually do this." "Hey, it is all right." Ashton's voice was gentle. "You have been through a lot. Anyone would cry. You do not understand." She wiped at her face with her napkin, trying to compose herself. "I have been trying so hard to be strong, to figure things out, and then you just do this kind thing and I cannot hold it together anymore." "Maybe you do not have to hold it together all the time. Maybe it is all right to accept help when you need it." Penelope looked at him through blurred vision, this cowboy who had appeared out of nowhere and turned her day upside down. "Why are you being so nice to me?" Ashton was quiet for a moment, his expression serious. "My mother was widowed when I was 12. My father died in a ranch accident, left her with 4 kids and no money. I watched her struggle for years, watched her go without so we could eat, watched people take advantage of her desperation. I swore when I got older if I ever had the chance to help someone in that situation, I would. So this is not about you specifically, I guess. This is about the kind of man I want to be." The honesty in his words struck Penelope hard. She looked down at the ring on her finger, gleaming in the afternoon light filtering through the window, and felt something shift inside her. Not just gratitude, though she felt that acutely. Something else, something fragile and new and terrifying. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I do not know how to repay you, do not want repayment. Just promise me you will go talk to Henry Blackwell about that teaching job. And maybe let me know how it goes." "How would I do that?" "Let you know, I mean. I come into town most Saturdays for supplies, usually at the general store mid-morning. You could find me there if you wanted." It was not quite an invitation, but something close to it. Penelope found herself nodding. "I will, and I will go see Mr. Blackwell this afternoon." "Good." Ashton smiled at her, a real smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes and made him look younger. "I have a feeling things are going to work out for you, Penelope Edwards." She wanted to believe him. For the first time since Thomas died, she let herself feel something like hope. They finished their meal with lighter conversation. Ashton told her about the Triple C Ranch, how he had worked there for 5 years and saved enough to buy a small piece of land of his own just north of the main property. He was building a house on it slowly, doing most of the work himself when he had time off. "It is not much yet," he admitted. "Just the frame and part of the roof, but it will be mine, bought and paid for. No one can take it away." "That is important," Penelope said, understanding the need for security, for something solid to hold on to. Having something that is yours. "What about you? What did you do back in Ohio, besides teaching?" She told him about the small house she and Thomas had rented, how she had made it pretty with curtains she sewed and flowers she grew in window boxes. How she had loved teaching, the challenge of reaching different children with different abilities. How she had thought her life was settled and planned, and then everything had fallen apart. "I do not think life ever turns out the way we plan," Ashton said thoughtfully. "My father always said the trick was learning to ride the changes instead of fighting them. Wise man. He was. I wish I had known him better, had more time with him. but I try to live the way he would have wanted. When they finally left the restaurant, the afternoon sun was starting its descent toward evening. Ashton walked Penelope back toward the boarding house, carrying her carpet bag over his shoulder despite her protests. "Thank you again," she said when they reached the front steps. "For everything. The meal, the money, the ring. I do not know what I would have done without your help." "You would have figured something out. You are stronger than you think." Ashton handed her the bag, his hand brushing hers again. "Go see Blackwell, and I will look for you on Saturday if that is all right." "It is all right, more than all right." She watched him walk away, his long stride eating up the distance, and touched the ring on her finger. It felt different now, weighted with new meaning. Not just a memory of the past, but somehow a promise for the future. The next morning, Penelope dressed in her best dress, a dark blue cotton that was only slightly faded, and made her way to the mayor's office. Her stomach churned with nerves, but she forced herself to walk up the stairs and knock on the door. Henry Blackwell turned out to be a portly man in his 50s with mutton-chop sideburns and a shrewd gaze. He listened to her explanation, examined her letter of reference from the Ohio school, and asked her a series of questions about teaching methods and discipline and curriculum. "You seem qualified on paper," he said finally, leaning back in his chair. "But I have to be frank with you, Mrs. Edwards. This is a conservative town. People talk. A young widow, new in town, no family connections. There will be questions about your moral character." Penelope felt her face heat. "I assure you, sir, my character is beyond reproach. I was a faithful wife and I am a respectable woman." "I am sure you are, but people will wonder why you came west alone. They will speculate." He drummed his fingers on his desk. "I have 3 other candidates for this position, 2 of them local women with family here. You understand that makes them more attractive choices." "I understand." Disappointment was a familiar weight in her chest. "But I would be good at this job, Mr. Blackwell. I love teaching and I am good with children. I would work hard and cause no trouble. Tell you what." Blackwell pulled out a pocket watch and checked the time. "School starts at 8 tomorrow morning. Why do not you come by and observe Miss Harrison's class, maybe teach a lesson yourself?" "I will be there, and so will 2 other board members. If you impress us, we will give you serious consideration." "Fair enough." It was more than she had hoped for. "Yes, sir, thank you, I will be there. 8 o'clock sharp, do not be late." Penelope floated out of the office, barely able to believe her luck. A chance. A real chance. She spent the rest of the day preparing, planning a lesson on arithmetic that would engage the students while demonstrating her competence. She barely slept that night, her mind racing with possibilities and worries in equal measure. The schoolhouse was a simple wooden building at the edge of town, painted white with a bell tower on top. Penelope arrived at 7:30, too nervous to risk being even a minute late. Miss Harrison, a pleasant woman in her 30s with kind eyes, welcomed her warmly and introduced her to the students as they arrived. There were 23 children ranging from 6 to 14, most from ranch families or town merchants. They eyed Penelope with the frank curiosity of children, whispering among themselves. She felt their assessment like a physical touch, knowing that children could be brutally honest judges of character. Mr. Blackwell arrived precisely at 8, along with 2 other men she assumed were school board members. They sat in the back of the room, stern-faced and silent, while Miss Harrison turned the class over to Penelope. She had been nervous, but the moment she stood in front of the children, something clicked into place. This was what she knew how to do. This was where she belonged. "Good morning," she said, pitching her voice to carry to the back of the room. "My name is Mrs. Edwards, and I am going to teach you something interesting about numbers today. Who here thinks arithmetic is boring?" Several hands went up, and there was some nervous laughter. Penelope smiled. I thought the same thing when I was your age. But then my teacher showed me something that changed my mind. She showed me that numbers can tell stories, just like words can. Let me demonstrate. She moved to the blackboard and began to teach, using a problem about a rancher buying cattle to illustrate multiplication and division. She made it engaging, asking questions, encouraging participation, gently correcting mistakes while praising effort. The children responded, leaning forward in their seats, raising their hands eagerly. She could feel the board members watching, judging, but she blocked them out and focused on the students. A little girl in the front row who struggled with the concept until Penelope knelt beside her desk and explained it a different way. An older boy in the back who tried to act too cool to care, but could not hide his interest when she made the problem more complex and challenging. By the time the lesson ended 45 minutes later, Penelope knew she had done well. The children were engaged and learning, Miss Harrison was beaming, and even the stern board members looked thoughtful rather than dismissive. "Thank you for that demonstration, Mrs. Edwards," Mr. Blackwell said as the children went to recess. "That was very capable teaching." "Thank you, sir. We will discuss this among the board and let you know our decision by tomorrow afternoon. Where can we find you?" "I am staying at Mrs. Coleman's boarding house on 3rd Street. "Very well. We will send word there." Penelope left the schoolhouse feeling cautiously optimistic. She had done her best, and that was all she could control. The rest was up to fate and the school board. Saturday morning found her at the general store at 10 o'clock, ostensibly to buy some thread but really hoping to see Ashton. She browsed the shelves, trying not to watch the door too obviously, feeling foolish for being so eager to see a man she barely knew. He walked in at 10:30, and her heart did a ridiculous little skip at the sight of him. He had cleaned up since Wednesday, wearing a newer shirt and with his hair still damp from washing, but he was still unmistakably Ashton, all lean strength and quiet confidence. His face lit up when he saw her. "Mrs. Edwards, you are here." "I am, and it is Penelope, please, Mrs. Edwards makes me feel like an old woman." "Penelope, then." He said her name carefully, like it meant something. "Did you talk to Blackwell?" "I did. I taught a demonstration lesson yesterday morning. They said they would give me an answer today." She could not keep the anxiety out of her voice. "I thought I did well, but I cannot be sure." "I am sure you did great. You have that look about you like someone who knows what she is doing." "What look is that?" "Confident, capable, like you could handle whatever came your way." "I do not feel very confident most of the time. Just desperate enough to keep trying." "Sometimes that is the same thing." Ashton shifted his weight, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "Listen, I need to pick up some supplies, but after that I was thinking of getting something to eat. Would you join me? If you have time, I mean." "If you want to." He was nervous. Penelope realized with a start. This strong, capable cowboy was nervous about asking her to lunch. Something about that endeared him to her more than all his previous kindness combined. "I would like that," she said, and watched his shoulders relax. They had lunch at the same restaurant as before, falling into conversation more easily this time. Ashton told her about the progress on his house, how he had gotten the roof finished and was starting on the interior walls. Penelope told him about the teaching demonstration, about the little girl who had struggled and then understood, about the satisfaction of seeing learning happen. "You really love it," Ashton observed. "Teaching, I mean. Your whole face changes when you talk about it." "I do. I always have. My father thought it was a waste, said I should just focus on finding a husband, but my mother supported me. She made sure I got the education I needed." Penelope smiled at the memory. "She died when I was 20, but I always felt like she was proud of what I became." "I am sure she was." They were halfway through their meal when a young boy ran into the restaurant, looked around wildly, and spotted Penelope. "Mrs. Edwards, Mrs. Coleman sent me to find you. Said there is a man at the boarding house asking for you. From the school board." Penelope's heart leaped into her throat. "Thank you." She fumbled for her bag, suddenly clumsy with nerves. "Go," Ashton said, dropping money on the table for both their meals. "I will walk with you." They hurried through the streets, Penelope's mind racing with possibilities. Had they made their decision already? Was that good or bad? What if they were coming to tell her no in person? Mr. Blackwell was waiting in the boarding house parlor, his expression giving nothing away. Penelope's hands shook as she smoothed her skirt. "Mrs. Edwards." "Good, you are here. I will make this brief. The school board met this morning and reviewed your qualifications and your demonstration lesson. We were impressed with your teaching ability and your manner with the children." Penelope held her breath. "However," Blackwell continued, and her heart sank, "we had concerns about your situation. Young widow, no family in town, no connections. In a small community like this, the schoolteacher is held to high standards of behavior. We need someone beyond reproach." "I understand that, sir. I assure you I would conduct myself appropriately." "I believe you would. And fortunately, you have a character witness who spoke quite persuasively on your behalf." Blackwell's stern expression softened slightly. "Ashton Vance came to see me this morning. Said he knew you from back east, that your late husband was a friend of his family, and that he could personally vouch for your moral character. That kind of endorsement from a respected man in the community carries weight, Mrs. Edwards." Penelope's eyes widened. She glanced at Ashton, who stood near the doorway looking studiously at the floor, his ears slightly red. "Mr. Vance also mentioned that you had family in the area," Blackwell went on. "His family, specifically. That you would be staying with them eventually, which provides appropriate supervision and community connections. That true?" It was absolutely not true. Ashton had just lied to the school board president on her behalf. Penelope opened her mouth, not sure what to say, and felt Ashton's gaze on her, steady and sure. "Yes," she heard herself say. "That is true." "Good. Then I am pleased to offer you the position, Mrs. Edwards. $8 a month plus room and board. Miss Harrison will stay on 2 more weeks to help you transition. You can move into the teacher's cottage next Monday. Does that suit you? $8 a month, room and board, a job, a home, security, everything she had been desperately hoping for." "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. I will not let you down. See that you do not. Welcome to Scottsbluff, Mrs. Edwards." Blackwell shook her hand formally, nodded to Ashton, and took his leave. The moment he was gone, Penelope whirled on Ashton. "You lied to him. You told him you knew my husband, that I had family connections through you. Why would you do that? Because you needed the job, and they needed a reason to trust you. Small-town politics." Ashton met her gaze calmly. "I know it puts you in an awkward position, but I figured we could make it work. You can come out to the ranch sometime, meet my mother and siblings, make it true enough. But you barely know me. Why would you risk your reputation lying for me? Because it was the right thing to do, and because—" He paused, then continued more quietly, "because I wanted to help you. Wanted to see you succeed." There was something in his voice that made Penelope's breath catch. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw past the kind stranger to something deeper. This man who had given her money, given her back her ring, vouched for her character to help her get a job. He had come into her life 3 days ago and already changed everything. "I do not know what to say," she admitted. "Say you will have dinner with me tomorrow. A real dinner to celebrate your new job. And to plan how we are going to make my story to Blackwell convincing enough that no one questions it." That sounds suspiciously like you are asking to court me, Mr. Vance. Maybe I am, if you would be open to that. Ashton stepped closer, his voice dropping. I know this is fast, and I know you are still grieving your husband, but there is something about you, Penelope. Something that makes me want to know you better, makes me want to be part of your life. If you feel any of that too, I would like the chance to see where it goes. Penelope's mind was spinning. She had been married, been widowed, been desperate and alone. She had not thought about romance, about starting over with someone new. Thomas had been dead only 6 months. She should still be in mourning, should be focusing on rebuilding her life, not entertaining thoughts about a cowboy with kind eyes and a talent for appearing when she needed him most. But her heart, that treacherous organ, was already halfway gone. I feel it too, she said quietly. But I am scared, Ashton. Scared of moving too fast, of making mistakes, of getting hurt again. I cannot promise you will never get hurt, but I can promise to be honest with you, to treat you with respect, and to try my best not to give you reason to regret taking a chance on me. He held out his hand, palm up. What do you say? Will you give me a chance? She looked at his hand, work roughened and strong, and thought about how it had felt when he pulled her out of danger, when he slid the ring back onto her finger, when he had held hers across the restaurant table. She thought about the kind of man who would lie to a school board president to help a stranger get a job, who would give money away without expecting anything in return, who talked about his mother with love and respect. Penelope placed her hand in his. Yes, I will give you a chance. His smile was worth every bit of fear and uncertainty. Tomorrow evening, then, I will pick you up at 6. That night, alone in her room at the boarding house, Penelope lay in bed and stared at the ceiling, her mind too full for sleep. Everything was happening so fast. 1 week ago, she had been on a train heading west with no plan and no hope. Now she had a job, a place to live, and the beginning of something with a man who made her feel alive in a way she had not felt in a long time. She twisted the ring on her finger, Thomas's ring that was now something else too. A symbol of Ashton's kindness, of new beginnings, of possibility. She felt a pang of guilt, as if accepting Ashton's attention was somehow betraying Thomas's memory, but Thomas was gone. She had loved him, had mourned him, had honored his memory by surviving when it would have been easier to give up. She did not think he would want her to spend the rest of her life alone, locked in the past. Thomas had been a kind man who wanted her to be happy. And right now, thinking about Ashton, she felt something that might eventually become happiness. Sunday evening arrived too slowly and too quickly at the same time. Penelope changed her dress 3 times before settling on the dark green one that brought out the color of her eyes. She fussed with her hair, pinning it up and taking it down and pinning it up again, until Mrs. Coleman knocked on her door to tell her that her gentleman caller had arrived. Ashton waited in the parlor wearing clean trousers and a white shirt that made his tanned skin look even darker. He had shaved and slicked his hair back, and he looked so handsome that Penelope felt suddenly shy. "You look beautiful," he said, his eyes warm with appreciation. "That color suits you. Thank you. You look very nice yourself." They walked to a restaurant on the other side of town, a nicer establishment than the one they had visited before. Ashton had reserved a table by the window, and they sat watching the sun set over the prairie while they ate steak and potatoes and talked about everything and nothing. Ashton told her about growing up on a ranch, about learning to ride before he could properly walk, about the year he had spent in Kansas City trying city life and hating every minute of it. Penelope told him about her childhood in Ohio, about her father's harness-making business, about the way her mother had encouraged her love of books, even though it was considered improper for girls to be too educated. "My father thought I should marry young, have a house full of children, Be content with that, Penelope said. He was not happy when I insisted on teacher's college, but Mother convinced him to let me go, and I loved every minute of it. Learning all those teaching methods, reading philosophy and literature, being around other women who wanted more than just domestic life. But you did marry, Ashton pointed out gently. I did. I met Thomas when I was teaching in my 3rd year. He was a clerk at a law office, educated, gentle, kind. He loved books as much as I did. We would sit up late at night reading to each other, discussing ideas. It was a good marriage for the time we had. You still love him? It was not a question, but Penelope answered anyway. I will always love him. He was my first love, my husband, the man I thought I would grow old with. But he is gone, and I am still here, and I have to figure out how to live with that. I am not trying to replace him, Ashton said carefully. I could not if I wanted to. But I would like to be part of your future, if you will let me. Why me, though? There must be eligible women in Scottsbluff who would be happy to catch your attention. Why a widow with no money and no prospects? Because you are brave. You picked up your life and moved across the country alone to start over. You did not give up even when things got hard. And because when I look at you, I see someone real. Not trying to be something they are not playing games. Just a woman trying to survive and make a life for herself. I respect that. I admire it. He reached across the table and took her hand. And because from the moment I pulled you out of the way of that horse, I have not been able to stop thinking about you. His honesty was disarming. Penelope felt her defenses crumbling, felt herself wanting to believe in this thing growing between them. I have been thinking about you too, she admitted. More than I probably should. No such thing as more than you should. Feelings are what they are. Ashton's thumb traced gentle circles on the back of her hand. I am not asking you to marry me tomorrow, Penelope. I am just asking for a chance to court you properly, to see where this goes. My husband has been dead 6 months. People will talk. Let them talk. I do not care what other people think, and you should not either. Easy for a man to say. Women are judged much more harshly for impropriety. Which is why we will be completely proper. No scandalous behavior, nothing that could hurt your reputation or your job. Just dinner sometimes, walks in town, maybe rides out to the ranch so you can meet my family and make that story I told Blackwell actually true. All above board and respectable. It sounded wonderful and terrifying in equal measure. Penelope squeezed his hand. All right, we can try this. But slowly, Ashton. I need to take this slow. Slow is fine. I am a patient man. They finished their dinner and walked back to the boarding house as twilight deepened into night. The streets were quiet, most people already home for the evening. Ashton walked her right to the door, proper and respectful, but before she could go inside he caught her hand. Thank you for tonight, he said. For giving me a chance. Thank you for being worth taking a chance on. He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles, a gesture so old-fashioned and courtly that it made her heart flutter. Then he released her and stepped back. I will come by next Saturday if that is all right. Maybe we could take a ride out to the ranch, have lunch with my mother. I would like that. Penelope went inside feeling like she was floating. Mrs. Coleman gave her a knowing look but said nothing, which was a small mercy. In her room, Penelope sat on the bed and looked at her hand, at the ring that had traveled such a strange journey from symbol of marriage to pawn shop commodity to gift from a man she barely knew, but was beginning to care for deeply. Monday morning, she moved into the teacher's cottage, a small 2-room house next to the schoolhouse. It was furnished simply with a bed, a table, 2 chairs, a stove, and some basic cooking implements. Miss Harrison helped her settle in and spent the day going over lessons and classroom management strategies. The children liked you, Miss Harrison said as they reviewed the attendance book. That is half the battle right there. If they like you, they will work harder to please you. What about the parents? Will they accept me? Most of them will. You proved you could teach, and Mr. Blackwell's endorsement carries weight. Just be patient and let them get to know you. Miss Harrison paused, then added delicately, I heard you are connected to the Vance family. Yes. The lie felt strange on her tongue. I knew Ashton's family back east. He was kind enough to vouch for me here. The Vances are well respected, Ashton especially. He is a hard worker and honest in his dealings. If he spoke for you, that means something in this town. Miss Harrison smiled. Between you and me, half the unmarried women in Scottsbluff have been trying to catch his eye for years. You must be special if he is taking notice. Penelope did not know what to say to that, so she just smiled and turned the conversation back to lesson plans. The first 2 weeks of teaching flew by in a blur of lesson planning, classroom management, and getting to know her students. Penelope fell back into the rhythm of teaching as easily as breathing, and she loved every challenging, exhausting minute of it. The children responded to her firm but kind approach, and the parents who came by to introduce themselves seemed cautiously approving. Saturday arrived again, and Ashton came to collect her at 10 o'clock, driving a wagon with 2 horses. Penelope had dressed in her riding skirt and boots, and Ashton's face lit up when he saw her ready to go. Ever ridden much? He asked as he helped her up onto the wagon seat. Some when I was younger. I am probably rusty. We will stick to the wagon today then. Another time I will teach you to ride properly, if you want to learn. The ride out to the Triple C Ranch took about 45 minutes, following the North Platte River north, and then cutting east across open prairie. The landscape was beautiful in its starkness, all golden grass and endless sky, with the bluffs rising in the distance like ancient sentinels. Ashton pointed out landmarks as they drove, telling her stories about the area, clearly proud of this land he called home. The ranch itself was a sprawling complex of buildings including a main house, several barns, bunkhouses for the ranch hands, and various outbuildings. Ashton's property was just north of the main ranch, a section of land with a partially built house visible in the distance. That is mine, he said, nodding toward it. 160 acres bought through the Homestead Act. I have been working on the house for 2 years now, doing what I can when I have time off. It is slow going, but it is progress. Can we see it? I was hoping you would ask. He turned the wagon toward his property, pride evident in his voice. It is not much yet, but it will be something someday. The house was indeed unfinished, just the frame and roof and partial walls, but Penelope could see the potential. It was a good size, with what would eventually be 4 rooms plus a loft. The location was perfect, on a slight rise with views of the river valley and the bluffs beyond. I am building it to last, Ashton explained as he helped her down from the wagon. Good strong timber, proper foundation. I want this to be a place that stands for generations. They walked through the structure, Ashton pointing out where each room would be, his vision for the finished house clear in his mind. Penelope found herself imagining it too, curtains on the windows, a garden out front, furniture arranged just so. It was dangerous to let herself imagine a future here, but she could not seem to help it. What do you think? Ashton asked when they had completed the tour. I think it will be beautiful. You are doing good work. I hope so. He looked at her seriously. I am building this for a family someday. A wife, children, a life together. That has always been the plan. The implication hung in the air between them. Penelope felt her heart speed up, equal parts thrilled and terrified by what he was suggesting without actually saying. That is a nice dream, she said carefully. It is more than a dream. It is a goal I am working toward. Ashton stepped closer. I know it is too soon to talk about this seriously, but I want you to know that I am not playing around here, Penelope. When I said I wanted to court you, I meant it. I am a man who knows what he wants, and I want a future with you. Ashton. Her voice came out shaky. We have known each other less than a month. I know. Which is why I am not asking you to decide anything right now. I'm just being honest about my intentions. You deserve to know where I am hoping this goes. She appreciated his honesty even as it scared her. I cannot make you any promises. Not yet. I am not asking for promises, just a chance. He touched her face gently, his calloused fingers soft against her skin. Come on, let us go meet my family before my mother sends out a search party. The main ranch house was large and welcoming, with a wide porch and flower boxes in the windows. Ashton's mother, Martha Vance, turned out to be a handsome woman in her mid-50s with the same gray-green eyes as her son. She welcomed Penelope with genuine warmth, ushering them into a kitchen that smelled like fresh bread and roasting meat. "So you are Penelope," Martha said, looking her over with frank assessment. "Ashton has been talking about you nonstop for 2 weeks. I was beginning to think he had made you up." "Mother," Ashton protested, his ears going red, "I am just being honest. You know I speak my mind." Martha turned back to Penelope with a smile. "I am glad to finally meet you. Ashton says you are the new school teacher." "Yes, madam, I just started 2 weeks ago." "Well, good. Heaven knows this town needs someone who can actually teach those children something useful. The last teacher before Miss Harrison was absolutely useless. Let the children run wild." Martha gestured toward the table. "Sit down, both of you. Lunch will be ready shortly. Ashton's siblings will be here soon. They are just finishing up morning chores." Penelope met the rest of the Vance family over the next hour. Ashton had 2 younger brothers, Samuel at 19 and Lucas at 16, both working the Triple C alongside their older brother. His youngest sibling was a sister, Lily, who was 14, and helped their mother with the house and garden. They were a lively, affectionate group, clearly close-knit and supportive of each other. "So Ashton tells us you knew the family back east," Samuel said as they ate lunch around the big kitchen table. "That must have been before we moved out here. I do not remember you." Penelope froze for a fraction of a second, caught in the lie Ashton had told. But Ashton smoothly interjected. "That is because you were barely walking when we left Ohio, Sam. Your memory does not go back that far." "Oh, right." Samuel accepted this without question. Martha, however, was watching Penelope with shrewd eyes, and Penelope had the distinct impression that Ashton's mother saw straight through the fabrication. But Martha said nothing, just passed the potatoes and changed the subject to talk about Lily's progress with her reading. After lunch, Ashton gave Penelope a tour of the ranch while his brothers went back to work. They walked through the barns, visited the horses, and stood by the river watching the water flow past. It was peaceful in a way Penelope had not experienced since before Thomas got sick, a sense of being exactly where she was supposed to be. "Your family is wonderful," she said as they stood by the water. "You are lucky to have them, I know. After my father died, we all pulled together. We had to survive. I think it made us closer." Ashton picked up a flat stone and skipped it across the water. "My mother is the strongest person I know. She held us together when everything was falling apart. She reminds me of you, that same steady strength." "I will take that as a compliment." He looked at her, squinting slightly in the bright sunlight. "She likes you, by the way, I can tell." "How can you tell?" "She did not interrogate you too much. That is her version of approval." Penelope laughed. "I got the feeling she saw right through your story about knowing the family back east. Probably. My mother is sharp, but she will not say anything if she thinks I have a good reason for the story, And she does like you. I was not making that up." They stayed at the ranch until late afternoon, and Ashton drove her back to town as the sun started its descent toward the horizon. Penelope felt peaceful in a way she had not felt in a long time, her mind quiet and her heart full. "Thank you for today," she said as they approached Scottsbluff. "For sharing your family with me. Thank you for coming. It meant a lot to me having you there." Ashton glanced at her sideways. "Can I see you again next week?" "Yes, I would like that." They fell into a pattern over the next several weeks. Ashton would come to town on Saturdays, and they would spend the day together, sometimes going out to the ranch, sometimes just walking around Scottsbluff and talking. He was always respectful, always proper, never pushing for more than she was ready to give. But the connection between them grew stronger with each passing week, an attraction that was both emotional and physical, a sense of rightness that Penelope could not deny. She found herself thinking about him constantly. During lessons, she would catch herself smiling over something he had said. At night, she would lie in bed and replay their conversations, remembering the way his eyes crinkled when he laughed, the way his hand felt holding hers, the sound of his voice saying her name. It terrified her how quickly she was falling for him. Thomas had been dead less than 8 months. She should still be grieving, should not be thinking about another man this way. But her heart would not cooperate with what she thought she should feel. Her heart wanted Ashton, wanted his smile and his kindness and the future he was offering. October gave way to November, and the weather turned colder. Penelope settled fully into her role as schoolteacher, earning the respect of parents and the affection of students. She began to feel like part of the community, no longer the outsider but a woman with a place and purpose. One Saturday in mid-November, Ashton arrived with a proposition. "How would you feel about learning to ride properly? I thought we could take the horses out, go for a real ride across the prairie." "I would love that, but I am warning you I am very out of practice." "That is fine. I am a good teacher, or so my siblings tell me." He brought a gentle mare named Daisy, and they spent the morning with Ashton teaching Penelope the basics of horseback riding. She was indeed rusty, but it came back to her gradually, and by afternoon she felt confident enough to go for an actual ride. They rode north from town, following a trail that wound through the grasslands toward the bluffs. Ashton kept Daisy on a lead rope at first, making sure Penelope was comfortable, but eventually he let her ride free. The sensation of moving across the open prairie on horseback was exhilarating, the wind in her face and the powerful animal beneath her responding to her commands. They stopped on a rise that overlooked the valley, the view stretching for miles in every direction. Ashton dismounted and helped Penelope down, his hands lingering on her waist a moment longer than necessary. "It is beautiful up here," she said, slightly breathless from the ride and from his proximity. "I come here sometimes when I need to think. Something about being up high, seeing so much space, it puts things in perspective." Ashton stood close beside her, his shoulder brushing hers. "I wanted to bring you here because this is my favorite place in the world, and I wanted to share it with you." Penelope turned to look at him, struck by the sincerity in his voice. "Thank you for sharing it, Penelope." He said her name like a question and a statement at once. "I need to tell you something." Her heart started to race. "What is it?" "I am in love with you." The words were simple and direct, no flourishes or poetry, just honest truth. "I know it has not been that long, and I know you might not be ready to hear it, but I cannot keep it to myself anymore. I love you. I think I started loving you the day I pulled you away from that horse and saw how brave you were even when you were scared." Penelope's eyes filled with tears. "Ashton, I do not know what to say." "You do not have to say anything. I am not asking you to say it back. I just needed you to know." He took her hands in his, holding them gently. "I love you and I want to marry you. I want to finish that house and fill it with you and children and a lifetime together. But I will wait as long as you need me to wait. No pressure, no ultimatums. Just the truth of how I feel." The tears spilled over, and Penelope let them fall. "I am scared," she whispered. "I am scared of loving you and losing you like I lost Thomas. I am scared of moving too fast, of making a mistake. But I am also scared of not taking this chance, of letting fear control my life. So what do you want to do?" "I want to stop being scared." She looked up at him, at this good man who had appeared in her life when she needed him most, who had given her back her wedding ring and in doing so given her back her hope. "I love you too, Ashton. I think I have for a while now. I just did not want to admit it." His smile was brilliant, joy lighting up his whole face. "You mean that?" "I do. I love you. And I am tired of fighting it." Ashton cupped her face in his hands and kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. Penelope kissed him back, wrapping her arms around his neck, letting herself feel everything she had been holding back. Relief and joy and love and hope all mixed together until she felt like she might burst from the fullness of it. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Ashton rested his forehead against hers. "Will you marry me? I know it is soon, but I do not want to wait anymore. I want to start our life together." "Yes." The word came out without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you." He kissed her again, harder this time, and Penelope felt like she was flying. This was nothing like it had been with Thomas, and that was all right. Thomas had been her first love, gentle and careful and safe. Ashton was her second chance, passionate and certain and real. Both were valid, both were important, and she could honor Thomas's memory while building a future with Ashton. They rode back to town as the sun set, making plans and dreaming out loud. They would get married in December, small ceremony at the church. Ashton would finish the house as quickly as possible so they could move in by spring. Penelope would keep teaching, and they would start their life together properly. "We should probably tell people," Penelope said as they reached the edge of town. "Starting with your family. They are going to be thrilled. My mother has been hinting that I should propose for the last month." "Has she really?" "She thinks you are good for me. Says I have been happier these past 2 months than I have been in years." Ashton squeezed her hand. "She is right, by the way." "You make me happy, Penelope. You make me happy too." They announced their engagement to Martha Vance first, who reacted with tears and hugs and an immediate insistence on hosting an engagement dinner. The rest of the family was equally enthusiastic, and by the time Penelope returned to town that evening, she felt like she was floating on air. The engagement became common knowledge in Scottsbluff within days. Most people were supportive, happy to see the schoolteacher settling down with a local man. There were a few raised eyebrows about the speed of the courtship and Penelope's recently widowed status, but Mr. Blackwell made it clear he had no objections, which silenced most of the gossip. Penelope wrote letters to her family back in Ohio, explaining the situation. Her father's response was terse and disapproving, but her aunt sent a warm letter congratulating her and wishing her happiness. It was enough. The next month passed in a flurry of preparations. Martha Vance took charge of planning the wedding with the enthusiasm of a general organizing troops. Penelope ordered a simple dress from the dressmaker in town, ivory cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs. Ashton worked on the house every spare moment, determined to get at least the main room and one bedroom fully finished before the wedding. They spent every Saturday together, sometimes at the ranch, sometimes in town, always talking and planning and growing closer. Ashton was courting her properly now, bringing flowers, walking her home from church, making his intentions clear to everyone. Penelope loved being courted by him, loved the attention and the romance and the sense of building something solid together. One evening in early December, a week before the wedding, Ashton came to the cottage after dinner. Penelope had been grading assignments by lamplight, but she set them aside when she heard his knock. "I brought you something," he said when she opened the door. He held out a small wooden box, beautifully carved with intricate patterns. Penelope took it carefully, admiring the craftsmanship. "Did you make this?" "I did. Worked on it at night after the ranch work was done." "Open it." Inside the box, nestled on a bed of velvet, was a ring. Not a wedding band, but an engagement ring with a small diamond set in a gold band. It was delicate and beautiful, clearly chosen with care. "Ashton," she breathed, "it is gorgeous. I wanted you to have a proper engagement ring. I know we are getting married soon, but I wanted to do this right." He took the ring from the box and held it up. "This does not replace your wedding ring from Thomas. That is part of your history, and I respect that. But this is about our future, our promise to each other." Penelope held out her left hand, where Thomas's ring still rested. Ashton slid the engagement ring onto her finger above it, and somehow having both rings there felt right. Past and future, memory and promise, all coexisting. "I love you," she said, tears in her eyes. "I love you so much. I love you too." He pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "One more week, and then you are mine forever. I am already yours." The wedding took place on December 15th. A cold, clear day with snow on the ground and sunshine glittering off everything. The church was packed with people from town and from the ranches, everyone wanting to witness the union of the schoolteacher and the cowboy. Penelope walked down the aisle in her ivory dress, her hands full of winter greenery tied with ribbon. Martha Vance dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. Lily Vance served as bridesmaid, beaming with excitement. And at the front of the church stood Ashton, looking handsome in a new suit, his eyes locked on Penelope with such love that she felt her breath catch. The ceremony was simple and traditional. They exchanged vows, speaking their promises clearly for everyone to hear. When the preacher said Ashton could kiss his bride, he did so tenderly, respectfully, but with enough passion that several people in the congregation chuckled. "I love you, Mrs. Vance," Ashton whispered against her lips. "I love you too," she whispered back. The reception was held at the ranch, with food and music and dancing. Penelope danced with Ashton, with his brothers, with some of the men from town who wanted to congratulate them. She laughed and ate and felt more purely happy than she had in longer than she could remember. As the evening wore on and the party showed no signs of slowing, Ashton leaned down and whispered in her ear, "What do you say we slip away to our own place? The house is finished, finished enough. I got the bedroom done and the stove working. It is not much yet, but it is ours." They made their excuses and left the party, driving the wagon through the moonlit night to Ashton's property. Their property now, Penelope realized with a thrill. The house looked beautiful in the moonlight, smoke rising from the chimney where Ashton had laid a fire earlier. He carried her over the threshold, both of them laughing at the tradition, and set her down gently in the main room. It was indeed finished, with proper walls and a floor and furniture arranged carefully. There was a table and chairs, a rocking chair near the fireplace, a rug on the floor. Through the open door she could see the bedroom with a large bed covered in quilts. "Welcome home," Ashton said softly. "It is perfect." Penelope turned in a slow circle, taking it all in. "You did all this yourself. I had help from my brothers on some of it, but mostly yeah. I wanted it to be ready for you." He came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "I know it is not fancy, but we can add to it over time, make it exactly what we want. It is already exactly what I want, because you are here." They stood like that for a long moment, just holding each other in their new home. Then Ashton turned her in his arms and kissed her deeply, and all the passion they had been restraining during their courtship came flooding out. He led her to the bedroom, both of them fumbling with buttons and laces, laughing and kissing and whispering words of love. Their wedding night was everything Penelope could have hoped for. Ashton was gentle but passionate, taking his time to learn what she liked, making sure she felt cherished and desired. It was different from her experiences with Thomas, more intense and urgent but no less loving. Afterward they lay tangled together under the quilts, talking softly while the fire crackled in the other room. "I cannot believe this is real," Penelope said, tracing patterns on Ashton's chest. "2 months ago I was trying to sell my wedding ring for survival money. Now I am married to an amazing man in our own house. It is real, and it is going to keep getting better." Ashton caught her hand and kissed her fingers. "We are going to have a good life, Penelope. I promise you that. I believe you." They fell asleep wrapped in each other, safe and warm and happy. The next weeks and months settled into a comfortable rhythm. Penelope continued teaching, walking to the schoolhouse each morning and returning home each afternoon to her husband and their house. Ashton worked the ranch during the day and spent evenings and weekends finishing the interior of their home and working his own land. It was hard work, but they were building something together, and that made every challenge worthwhile. In February, Penelope realized she was pregnant. She told Ashton over dinner one evening, watching his face light up with joy and wonder. "A baby." He came around the table and pulled her into his arms. "We are having a baby, we are. Due sometime in September, I think. That is the best news I have ever heard." He kissed her deeply, then dropped to his knees and kissed her still flat stomach. "Hello in there, little one. I am your father and I already love you more than anything." Penelope laughed and cried at the same time, overcome with emotion. This baby, this new life, felt like the final piece of her fresh start falling into place. She had lost so much, but she had gained even more. The pregnancy was relatively easy, and Penelope continued teaching through the spring term. When school let out for summer in June, she was 5 months along and starting to show noticeably. Martha Vance fussed over her like a mother hen, making sure she was eating enough and resting enough and taking care of herself. "You are growing my grandchild," Martha said firmly when Penelope protested the attention. "I am going to make sure you are both healthy." Ashton finished the rest of the house that summer, adding 2 more bedrooms and a proper kitchen. He built a cradle for the baby with his own hands, carving their initials into the headboard along with a date. September 1885. Their son was born on September 23rd, after a long labor that scared Ashton half to death. But when the midwife finally placed the baby in his arms, healthy and squalling and perfect, he cried like a child himself. "He is beautiful," Ashton said, staring at his son in wonder. "Penelope, he is perfect." "He has your eyes," Penelope said tiredly from the bed. She was exhausted but filled with love as she watched her husband hold their baby. They named him Andrew Thomas Vance, honoring both his father and Penelope's first husband. It felt right to carry Thomas's name forward this way, to acknowledge that he was part of the journey that led to this moment. Andrew was a healthy, happy baby who grew quickly. Penelope took the fall term off from teaching to stay home with him, but she planned to return in the spring with Martha watching the baby during school hours. She missed teaching, but these early months with her son were precious, and she treasured every moment. Ashton was a devoted father, coming home from ranch work eager to hold Andrew and play with him. He sang to the baby, talked to him constantly, carried him around the property showing him everything. Watching her husband with their son made Penelope fall even more deeply in love with him. Their first Christmas as a family of 3 was magical. They spent it at the ranch with the whole Vance clan, Andrew being passed around and adored by all his aunts and uncles and grandmother. Ashton gave Penelope a new wedding band to go with her original ring and her engagement ring, this one engraved with their wedding date and Andrew's birth date. "Now you have rings marking all the important parts of your story," he said as he slid it onto her finger. "Past, present, and future, all together." Penelope looked at the 3 rings on her finger, glinting in the firelight, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. She had survived heartbreak and loss and desperate poverty. She had taken a chance on a cowboy who bought her wedding ring and gave it back to her. And from that moment of kindness, an entire life had bloomed. "I love you," she said, pulling Ashton close. "Thank you for finding me that day. Thank you for seeing something in me worth saving." "You saved yourself," Ashton corrected gently. "I just helped a little bit. You are the strongest person I know, Penelope Vance." The years that followed were full and rich and happy. Penelope returned to teaching when Andrew turned 1, balancing her career with motherhood. Ashton built his ranch into something profitable, adding cattle and horses and expanding his land holdings. They had 3 more children: a daughter named Rose, born in 1887, twin boys named Matthew and Michael, born in 1889, and another daughter named Sarah, born in 1891. Their house grew with their family, with Ashton adding rooms and improvements as needed. The land prospered under his careful management, and they became established members of the community. Penelope taught for 20 years before retiring, affecting the lives of hundreds of children. Ashton served on the town council and helped build a new school building. Through it all, they remained deeply in love. They had their struggles, of course. Years when the cattle prices dropped or the weather killed crops. A winter when Rose was very sick and they thought they might lose her. The normal challenges of raising 4 energetic children and running a ranch and maintaining a household. But they faced everything together, as partners and lovers and best friends. Ashton never let Penelope forget how much he loved her, courting her constantly even after years of marriage. Penelope never took for granted the second chance she had been given, the life that had emerged from her darkest moment. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Ashton took Penelope back to the rise overlooking the valley, the place where he had first told her he loved her. They stood holding hands, older and weathered by life but still as connected as ever. "You ever regret it?" Ashton asked. "Marrying me so fast, taking such a big chance on someone you barely knew?" "Never," Penelope said without hesitation. "Not once. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. I am the lucky one. I got to spend 10 years married to the most amazing woman in the world. Only 10, we have at least 50 more to go." He laughed and pulled her close. "I am counting on it." They watched the sunset together, as they had done so many times before, as they would do so many times again. Below them spread the ranch they had built, the house that held their children and their life together, the land that had become home. It was everything Penelope had never dared to dream of in those dark days after Thomas died, when she thought her life was over. But it had not been over. It had just been waiting for a new chapter to begin. A chapter that started with a desperate woman trying to sell her wedding ring and a kind cowboy who bought it, and then put it back on her finger forever. Years later, when Penelope was an old woman surrounded by children and grandchildren, she would look at the rings on her finger and tell the story to anyone who would listen. The story of how she lost everything and found something better. The story of a man who saw past her desperation to the person underneath. The story of second chances and new beginnings and love that came when you least expected it. And she would always end the story the same way. Sometimes the worst moments of your life are really just the beginning of the best ones. You just have to be brave enough to keep going until you find out which is which. Andrew grew up to be a rancher like his father, taking over much of the operation as Ashton got older. Rose became a teacher like her mother, continuing the family tradition. The twins went into business together, opening a general store in Scottsbluff that became the most successful in the county. Sarah married a lawyer and moved to Denver but visited often, bringing her own children to run through the fields where she had played as a girl. Ashton and Penelope grew old together on their land, watching their family expand and flourish. They added a porch onto the house where they would sit in rocking chairs on summer evenings, holding hands and watching the sunset just as they had done for decades. Their love never diminished, never faded, but grew deeper and richer with every passing year. When Ashton died at the age of 73, peacefully in his sleep after a full day of work, Penelope was devastated but also grateful. They had been given 48 years together, 48 years of love and partnership and joy. Not everyone got that gift. She continued to wear all her rings until her own death, 5 years later. When she was buried beside her husband on the rise overlooking their land, their children made sure she was wearing the 3 bands. Thomas's ring that represented her past, and the love that shaped her youth. Ashton's engagement ring that represented the moment everything changed, and the wedding band engraved with dates that represented the life they built together. The house Ashton built still stands today, lived in by his descendants, a testament to one cowboy's skill and determination. The story of how he met his wife, buying her wedding ring at her lowest moment and giving it back to her as a gift, became family legend, passed down through generations as an example of kindness and love and second chances. Because that is what the best love stories are really about. Not fairy tale perfection, but real people finding each other in imperfect circumstances and choosing to build something beautiful together. Not about never falling down, but about finding someone who will help you get back up and stand beside you as you move forward. Penelope Edwards came to Nebraska with nothing but desperation and determination. She left a legacy of love that touched hundreds of students, 4 children who grew up knowing they were cherished, and a marriage that proved love could strike twice if you were brave enough to open your heart again. And it all started with a wedding ring, a pawnbroker's window, and a cowboy who understood that sometimes the most valuable things cannot be measured in dollars. Sometimes they can only be measured in the courage it takes to give someone hope when they have run out, to see potential when others see only problems, and to believe that every ending can also be a beginning if you are willing to take the chance. Ashton Vance took that chance on a woman trying to sell her wedding ring. And in return, she gave him a lifetime of love, a house full of children, and the satisfaction of knowing that his kindness changed not just one life but generations of lives that followed. That is the power of compassion. That is the magic of second chances. That is the enduring truth of a love story that began with a simple act of generosity and grew into something that lasted beyond lifetimes, echoing through the years as a reminder that the best things in life often come when we least expect them, in the form we least anticipate, at the moment we need them most. And somewhere in Nebraska, on a rise overlooking a valley, 2 souls rest side by side, forever connected by the rings that told their story and the love that made it all possible.